I'd been running for 4 months. Not from something I did, from something that refused to stop happening to me. Tonight, in this lounge where Seoul's elite gathered, I finally stopped running. I just didn't know I was about to crash into something far more lethal than what I was escaping. Before we dive deeper into this tale and discover what unfolds, please subscribe to our channel and drop a comment telling us where you're tuning in from. Your engagement helps us create these narratives. Crimson Moon, Seoul's most coveted nightclub, pulsed with bodies drenched in purple and blue neon. Glass sculptures caught light across designer blazers and satin gowns, transforming everyone into inhabitants of a universe I was merely passing through. My scrubs were hanging in my locker at Seoul Medical. My emergency room badge was buried in my bag. Tonight, I was simply another silhouette in the masses. Or so I'd prayed. Before we dive in, beautiful people, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. It's the best way you can support us as we continue delivering captivating stories that'll keep you hooked every single day. For months, 120 days of sensing stares drilling into my spine. The identical outline positioned outside my apartment complex before sunrise. The same form hovering near the hospital entrance after my rounds concluded. The same darkness at the bakery where I purchased my morning tea. Always 4 spaces behind in queue. Always observing. I'd filed complaints 4 times. For different detectives. For matching rejections. He's likely just another patron, ma'am. Seoul's an enormous city. These things happen. Have you got concrete evidence he's targeting you? Evidence. As if the frozen burden of an unknown person's attention wasn't proof sufficient. As if the trembling in my fingers when I secured my door each evening didn't matter. As if fear was something you could capture on film and present in official documents. So tonight I'd arrived at Crimson Moon. Not to commemorate anything, not to erase memories, just to vanish into the sound and warmth and masses. To be consumed entirely by a gathering where nobody could isolate me. Then I spotted him, the man, my pursuer, positioned near the counter in an unremarkable tan coat, a tumbler of something golden in his grip and his stare, those vacant, soulless eyes fixed precisely on me. My lungs seized, the space spun. I retreated backward and crashed into someone's torso. Easy. The voice sliced through the rhythm like steel. Deep, measured, colored with an inflection that transformed Korean into velvet and shadow. I pivoted, an excuse already building on my tongue, and the phrases vanished. He wasn't what I anticipated in a venue like this. Not ostentatious, not boisterous, but impossible to overlook. Tall, imposing really, with a variety of aura that didn't request attention so much as seized it. His ensemble was obsidian black, fitted so flawlessly it appeared sewn onto his frame. Crimson shirt underneath, unfastened at the throat, no neckwear. Ink crawled from his collarbone into the material like mysteries he wasn't attempting to conceal, just regulate. His features were all severe lines and restrained force. Prominent bones, a chin that could slice marble, and irises the shade of midnight jade, deep, cryptic, the sort of stare that absorbed everything and disclosed nothing. Power emanated from him like warmth from asphalt in July. The gathering appeared to divide without him shifting, as if even the melody understood to grant him territory. You appear, he stated, his attention sweeping across me with surgical assessment, like you're choosing between fleeing or yelling. I gulped audibly. Neither, just understanding I selected the incorrect venue to disappear. His stare pursued mine across the space to the counter, to the man observing me. Something frigid and keen sparked across his expression, present and absent in an instant, like a weapon momentarily reflecting illumination. Your follower? He inquired, though it didn't register as an inquiry. I acknowledged, abruptly feeling weak. A mature woman, an emergency room nurse who'd sealed knife wounds and stabilized fractured ribs with her bare palms, diminished to shrinking in a nightclub because she couldn't eliminate a phantom. The stranger's expression hardened almost invisibly. He examined me again, and briefly, I witnessed something hazardous shift behind those jade irises. Not aimed at me, at everything surrounding. Would you? The phrases escaped before I could capture them. Frantic, rash. Would you move with me? A pursuer's observing, and I just require him to believe. I halted. Warmth flooded my features. Apologies, that was crossing boundaries. I don't even recognize you. His mouth shifted. Not exactly a grin, but near enough to be disturbing. You don't, he concurred, his attention securing mine with a force that caused my heartbeat to falter. But I recognize his category. He offered his palm. Extended digits, groomed nails, a substantial platinum timepiece emerging from under his sleeve. But his hand was incorrect. Hardened in locations a corporate figure shouldn't possess. Marked along the rim like he'd gripped something keen too frequently. A cautionary tremor traveled down my backbone. One movement, he voiced quietly, his tone descending to something that resembled both vow and warning. Let's guarantee he never stares at you again. I wavered. Every instinct I'd sharpened over 4 months of dread bellowed at me to depart. This man was hazardous. Not potentially, definitely. I could sense it in how the atmosphere around him appeared denser. The manner even the server's vision skittered aside when he glanced that direction. But then I detected motion at the counter. The pursuer advancing forward, placing down his tumbler, beginning toward me. I positioned my palm in the stranger's. His clasp was solid, heated, and strangely anchoring as he guided me onto the floor. His opposite palm rested at the curve of my spine, gentle but authoritative, directing me through the gathering with the variety of rehearsed comfort that indicated he was accustomed to individuals shifting from his trajectory. As we entered into the violet illumination under the sculptures, I observed 2 men in dark ensembles adjust locations near the columns. Their focus never abandoned us, not the venue's protection. Something different. I'm Jasmine, I voiced, abruptly requiring to occupy the quiet to render this sensation ordinary. Jasmine Williams. Miho, he answered. Then, following a break that seemed weighted, Kang. Something regarding how he expressed it caused me to suspect it wasn't the identity he utilized frequently, or perhaps not the one he favored. The melody transformed. Something gentler, more personal. Miho drew me nearer, one palm gliding completely around my middle. His opposite palm captured mine, elevating it between us in a stance that seemed ceremonial and claiming all simultaneously. We shifted. And heaven assist me, he understood how to guide. He's still observing, Miho breathed, his exhalation heated against my ear. Does that disturb you? It horrifies me, I confessed. But presently, it's the initial occasion in months I don't sense like Corey. His digits constricted marginally on my middle. You shouldn't need to sense like Corey whatsoever. Inform that to the authorities. The authorities? He stated, his tone solidifying in a manner that caused the strands on the rear of my neck to elevate. Don't manage men like him. I perform. Before I could request what he signified, Miho's attention lifted above my shoulder. One keen, almost undetectable acknowledgement to someone in the darkness. I attempted to rotate, but his palm at my middle maintained me positioned. Don't examine, he voiced softly. Just move. So I performed. I permitted him to direct me across the surface. Permitted the melody and his constant aura to submerge the terror that had been my perpetual associate. For 3 minutes and 52 seconds, I experienced secure. When the composition concluded, I ultimately glanced toward the counter. The man had disappeared. My pursuer, the phantom who'd tormented me for 4 months, had merely evaporated. Where is he? Somewhere he won't disturb you again, Miho stated. His manner was informal, but his irises contained something that caused my circulation to freeze and ignite all simultaneously. What did you perform? I defended you. He liberated me gradually, though his palm remained at my middle a duration longer than required. Isn't that what you desired? It was. But the manner he expressed it, the conviction, the conclusiveness caused me to comprehend I hadn't simply requested a stranger to move. I'd requested something far more hazardous for assistance, and he'd responded. Miho retreated, modifying his sleeve with informal exactness. You should return to your residence, Jasmine Williams. You're secure presently. How do you recognize? That not exactly grin reappeared. Because I'm the individual determining who's secure in this metropolis. He pivoted to depart and terror, a logical frantic terror gripped me. Wait, Will I encounter you again? Miho paused, examining backward across his shoulder. In the fractured violet illumination, his irises appeared almost tender. Almost. You already are, he voiced softly. You just weren't aware of it. Then he had disappeared, vanishing into the gathering with his suited phantoms following behind him. I remained alone on the floor, my heart hammering, my palms trembling, experiencing safer and more horrified than I had in months. Because somewhere in the rear of my consciousness, I understood 3 elements. 1. My pursuer had disappeared. 2. The man who'd caused him to vanish wasn't a rescuer. 3. I'd just exchanged one phantom for another. And this one, I suspected, would be substantially harder to evade. The harsh illumination of Seoul Medical's emergency ward was merciless. At 6 in the morning, I positioned myself at the coordination desk, staring at the patient file before me without actually perceiving it. The phrases blurred together. Statistics, pharmaceutical schedules, operative annotations, all white static against the recollection executing on repetition in my mind. You already are. You just weren't aware of it. 24 hours since Crimson Moon. 24 hours since a stranger caused my pursuer to disappear with nothing except an acknowledgement. 24 hours since I'd experienced the phantom of his palm at my middle and persuaded myself it signified nothing. It had to signify nothing. Jasmine. Dr. Park's tone severed through my dissent. The penetration wound in Section 4 requires a consultation. You prepared? Gunshot injury. Correct. This was my universe. Sanitized, structured, administered by regulations I comprehended. Not shadowy lounges and men who communicated in weighted silences. I'm ready, I stated, securing the file closed. I could justify this. I would justify this. The pursuer was likely frightened away by Miho's assurance, his evident prosperity, his whatever he was. Perhaps he'd simply been some fixated nobody who grew disinterested. Perhaps I'd invented the hazard in Miho's irises. Transferred my individual terrors onto a man who was merely being compassionate. Compassionate men didn't possess marked palms and guards in the darkness. I thrust through the emergency section entrances, forcing the considerations down where they belonged, interred profoundly with all the remaining elements I couldn't manage to contemplate. By midday, I'd sealed 2 wounds, stabilized a vehicle collision casualty, and conversed a distressed parent through her son's emergency procedure. Standard, ordinary, secure. Then the blossoms arrived. Shipment for Jasmine Williams, the messenger announced from the coordination desk. I examined upward from documentation to witness a massive arrangement. Ivory orchids and profound burgundy dahlias organized with the variety of exactness that bellowed costly. The crystal container captured the illumination, refracting it into fractured rainbows across the surface. My abdomen descended. Who are they from? I inquired, my tone emerging keener than planned. The messenger lifted his shoulders. No notation, just indicates to ship to emergency nurse Williams before midday. He extended a tablet. Signature here. My palm quivered as I marked my signature. The messenger departed. The blossoms remained. Gorgeous and horrible in equal proportion. Someone's acquired an admirer, Dr. Park stated, proceeding behind me. About occasion you return to the scene. I couldn't reply. Couldn't inhale because ivory orchids were my preferred blossom. A detail I'd referenced precisely once casually to a colleague 7 months prior. And I'd never informed anyone else, never shared regarding it, never rendered it accessible. He's located a new method to observe me, the pursuer. It had to be. Miho hadn't frightened him away. He'd just rendered him more cautious, more intrusive. Presently he understood where I functioned, what I preferred, when my rotation concluded. Jasmine, you acceptable? One of the remaining nurses contacted my shoulder. Acceptable, I deceived. Just unanticipated. I abandoned the blossoms at the desk. Couldn't compel myself to contact them. Couldn't cease examining them either. Their flawless petals like a vow and a warning enclosed in transparent material. The remainder of my rotation crawled by in a fog of dread. Every man who traveled through the emergency section entrances caused me to recoil. Every footfall in the corridor registered as chase. By the occasion 7 arrived and I departed, My nerves were stripped exposed. I utilized the rear departure, circumvented the primary corridor, maintained my head descended as I traveled through the hospital lateral entrance toward the avenue where I typically secured a vehicle. Then I witnessed him. Miho Kang, reclining against a charcoal Lexus sedan positioned precisely outside the entrances. Identical obsidian ensemble, or perhaps a different one severed precisely identically. Arms folded loosely, expression cryptic, appearing like he possessed every privilege in the universe to exist there. Appearing like he'd been anticipating. My feet halted shifting. My heart didn't. He corrected when he witnessed me, releasing his arms with liquid elegance. Jasmine. Not Miss Williams, not the nurse from the lounge, just my identity. Communicated like he'd expressed it 1,000 occasions before. What are you performing here? I succeeded, my tone steadier than I experienced. Guaranteeing you return to your residence securely. I don't require. I halted, something connecting into position. Are you pursuing me? He angled his head marginally, contemplating the inquiry like it was a riddle with an evident response I'd somehow overlooked. No, observing. There's a distinction. The informal manner he expressed it, no shame, no facade, caused my circulation to freeze. That's not superior. That's not I retreated astride. That's what pursuers perform, Miho. They observe. Something sparked in his irises. Not remorse, something firmer. Pursuers observe because they desire to claim. I observe because I defend. There's a distinction there too. I don't remember requesting your defense. You performed. He thrust away from the vehicle, accepting a solitary stride forward. Not hostile, just assured. Last evening when you positioned your palm in mine and requested me to cause him to cease examining at you. That was requesting a movement, not I motioned desperately at him, at the vehicle, at the entire insane circumstance. Not this. The movement was how it commenced, he voiced softly. But men like him don't cease because of a movement, Jasmine. They cease because someone causes them to cease conclusively. The burden of that phrase conclusively resolved between us like a corpse. Did you transmit me blossoms? I inquired abruptly. His expression creased. No. Ivory orchids and burgundy dahlias shipped to the emergency ward. No notation. Miho's expression obscured. Not fury, computation. When? Today. Midday. He extracted his mobile, typed something rapidly, then examined me again. Enter the vehicle. Pardon me? Enter the vehicle, Jasmine. We're not possessing this dialogue on the avenue. I'm not entering a vehicle with someone who confesses to observing me. The blossoms weren't from me, he severed in, his tone accepting an edge that caused my backbone to correct involuntarily. Which signifies someone else understands where you function, what you prefer, and how to approach near to you. Someone who isn't frightened of being witnessed. My mouth became arid. That man from last evening won't be transmitting blossoms, Miho stated flatly. Rely on me. The conviction in his tone informed me precisely why I should rely on him on that specific element, and precisely why I should flee. But my feet wouldn't shift. Because if Miho was communicating the truth, if the blossoms weren't from him, then I possessed a new difficulty, a new phantom. And the sole individual who appeared to understand how to manage phantoms was positioned before me with a vehicle and an proposal I couldn't manage to decline. One journey, I heard myself voice. Straight to my apartment. No diversions. Concurred. He accessed the passenger entrance. I glided inside before I could alter my consciousness. The interior smelled like hide and something obscurer, smoke perhaps, or the phantom of costly fragrance. Miho rounded the vehicle and glided behind the controls with rehearsed comfort. The motor hummed to existence. We drew into Seoul's evening circulation in quiet. I should have been horrified. Should have exited at the initial crimson illumination and fled. But something regarding how Miho operated, restrained, aware, examining mirrors with tactical exactness caused me to experience the identical element I'd experienced on the floor. Secure. Horrifyingly, inexplicably secure. How extensive? I inquired ultimately. He didn't simulate not to comprehend. For weeks. For weeks. He'd been observing me for 4 weeks before the lounge. Before I'd ever communicated to him. Why? His expression constricted. You managed one of my individuals in the emergency room. Penetration injury to the torso. You didn't request inquiries. Didn't summon the authorities when you witnessed the ink. Just sealed him and informed him to remain from difficulty. I remembered. 3 months prior, delayed rotation, a man hemorrhaging on my surface with ink crawling up his throat and terror in his irises. I'd performed my function. Nothing additional. He could have expired if you'd wavered, Miho continued. You didn't. That variety of judgment is uncommon. So you've been pursuing me as gratitude. I've been observing, he amended. Because uncommon elements attract attention, and not all of it is appreciative. We drew outside my apartment complex. Miho transformed into stationary, but didn't eliminate the motor. He pivoted to confront me, and in the dim interior illumination, his irises appeared less like midnight jade and more like something liquefied. I'm not your adversary, Jasmine, he voiced softly. But I'm not your companion either. What I am is the sole element positioned between you and individuals who've observed what I observed. That you're cautious, perceptive, and far too compassionate for your individual benefit. I don't require defense. You perform. Not furious, just assured. You just don't recognize it yet. He extended into his blazer and extracted a card. Matte obsidian, no pattern, just a solitary phrase embossed in platinum. SHADOW, below it, a contact sequence. If anything seems incorrect, he stated, forcing the card into my palm. If anyone approaches you, if you receive any additional unwanted presence, summon me. Not the authorities. Me. His digits remained against mine for a pulse longer than required, heated, marked, constant. Then he liberated me. I exited the vehicle on trembling limbs, the card igniting in my palm, observed him draw from the boundary with the identical liquid restraint he performed everything else. The rear illuminations disappeared around the angle, abandoning me positioned alone in the accumulating obscurity. And for the initial occasion in months, perhaps years, I experienced the absence of terror. Not because the hazard had disappeared. Because something more hazardous had determined I was worth defending. I examined downward at the card in my palm. Shadow. I should have discarded it. Should have summoned the authorities, submitted a complaint, acquired a protection directive. Instead, I glided it into my pocket and traveled inside. Already understanding I'd retained the sequence. The notation was wedged under my windscreen blade like a citation. I almost didn't witness it. Morning rotation, fleeing delayed, tea scalding my tongue as I speed traveled through the hospital parking structure. But something regarding the severe ivory paper against my vehicle's obscure coating caused me to halt. My palm quivered as I drew it liberated. Block symbols printed, not inscribed. 6 phrases that transformed my circulation to frost. He can't defend you perpetually. The tea glided from my clasp, splashing across concrete. I rotated around, examining the dim structure, sequences of vehicles, harsh illuminations humming overhead, the distant reverberation of a motor initiating. Nothing, nobody. But someone had existed here. Someone had contacted my vehicle, abandoned this. I was at the authority facility within the hour. Ma'am, this could originate from anyone, the detective stated, barely examining at the notation. The identical one who dismissed me 3 weeks prior. A displeased patient, perhaps. You function in emergency, correct? Individuals grow emotional. This isn't regarding a patient, I interrupted. Someone's been pursuing me for months. I submitted complaints. You performed nothing. Presently they're abandoning warnings on my vehicle. He exhaled, the resonance of a man who'd heard this narrative too frequently without a direct warning of violence or a transparent suspect. There's not substantial we can perform. I can submit another complaint, but you won't actually perform anything. We'll enhance patrols in your region, he proposed, his manner rendering it transparent he wouldn't. In the interim, perhaps contemplate varying your schedule. Don't station in the identical location. Remain aware of your environment. I abandoned the facility experiencing more defenseless than when I'd arrived. The notation was presently evidence, secured aside in a document that would never be accessed. And I was still alone. Except I wasn't. Not genuinely. When I returned to my residence that evening, Miho was anticipating in the corridor of my apartment complex. Not outside, inside. Positioned in one of the worn seats near the ascent like he belonged there, his obsidian ensemble flawless against the faded material. He examined upward when I entered, and something in his expression informed me he'd existed there extensively. "How did you enter here?" I required, my tone reverberating in the compact territory. I requested access. The complex supervisor permitted me in. The complex supervisor doesn't just permit strangers. I can be very compelling. He positioned himself, releasing to his complete stature with that identical liquid elegance. We require to converse. Something inside me fractured. For months of terror, 3 authority dismissals, mysterious blossoms, warning notations. It all arrived boiling to the exterior. "No," I stated, my tone elevating. "You require to depart. I don't recognize what variety of activity you're executing, but I'm concluded." The blossoms, the observing, presently penetrating into my complex. I didn't transmit the blossoms. Then who performed? Because someone understands where I function, where I reside, what I prefer. I extracted the notation from my container, palms trembling as I thrust it toward him. "Someone abandoned this on my vehicle this morning. He can't defend you perpetually. That's regarding you, isn't it? This is because of you." Miho accepted the notation, his expression solidifying as he examined it. When he examined upward, his irises contained something obscure and frigid. "When did you locate this?" "This morning, 7 in the morning. And you proceeded to the authorities." Naturally, I proceeded to the authorities. What was I supposed to perform? Summon you? "I don't even recognize you, Miho. For all I recognize, you're the individual." I halted, the accusation capturing in my throat. "Express it," he stated softly. "Perhaps you're the individual performing this. Perhaps you're my pursuer, and this is all some disturbed." "If I were your pursuer," Miho interrupted, his tone descending to something that caused my respiration to capture, "you would never have witnessed him breathing." The conviction in those phrases, the absolute unshakable conviction, froze me positioned. He advanced nearer. Not warning, but measured. Near enough that I had to angle my head backward to sustain visual connection. Near enough that I could detect smoke and costly fragrance. Near enough to be hazardous. "I'm not your pursuer, Jasmine," he stated, my identity rolling off his tongue like a mystery. "But someone is. Someone who understands you're under my defense and desires to witness if I'll recoil." "Under your defense," I repeated. I never concurred to that. "You positioned your palm in mine and requested me to cause him to cease examining at you. That was concurrence enough. For a movement, nothing with me is ever just one element." He extended outward gradually, granting me duration to draw aside, and secured a strand behind my ear. His digits grazed my features, hardened and heated. "You requested me to witness you, so I perform. Every morning when you depart for function. Every evening when you return to your residence. Every duration you assume you're alone." I should have been horrified. Should have bellowed, fled, summoned those useless authorities backward. Instead, my heart hammered for an entirely different cause. "That's not defense," I whispered. "That's fixation." "Affirmative," he concurred simply. "But mine maintains you respiring." His palm descended from my features, but he didn't retreat. The atmosphere between us seemed charged, dense with something I didn't desire to identify. "The notation is a caution," Miho continued, his tone returning to that restrained tranquility. "Someone desires me to understand they can access you. That my defense possesses boundaries. Then perhaps you should cease defending me." "I can't." "Why not?" For the initial occasion, his composure fractured, just a portion, just sufficient for me to witness something exposed and famished beneath the exterior. "Because you examined at one of my individuals, a criminal hemorrhaging on your surface, and managed him like he was worth rescuing. Nobody's examined at me like that in a very extensive duration." He retreated, creating distance that somehow seemed more personal than closeness. "You're under my defense presently, Jasmine, whether you desire it or not." He extracted another card identical to the one already igniting a cavity in my pocket and forced it into my palm. "If anyone approaches you again, summon me." "Not them." His irises directed toward the entrance, toward the authority facility I'd wasted my morning at. They can't assist you. I can. At what expense? The inquiry suspended between us. Miho's mouth shifted into something that wasn't exactly a grin. We'll discuss conditions when you're prepared to negotiate. Then he had disappeared, shifting past me toward the entrance with that identical restrained elegance. I observed him vanish into the Seoul evening, surrounded by phantoms that had been anticipating outside. I examined downward at the card in my palm. Shadow. This occasion I didn't even simulate I wouldn't summon. The establishment didn't possess an identity. At minimum, not one exhibited anywhere I could witness. Just an obsidian entrance in an elite district, a compact platinum inscription with Korean symbols I couldn't interpret, and a man in a flawless ensemble who accepted one examination at me and stated, "Miss Williams, Mr. Kang is anticipating you." Miho had summoned the previous evening. Not messaged, called, his tone deep and measured through the mobile. Possess dinner with me. Not an inquiry, but not exactly an instruction either. I should have stated no. Should have disregarded the summons entirely. Instead, I'd located myself requesting why. Because you merit to consume somewhere that doesn't serve tea from a dispenser, he'd answered. And because I'd prefer to understand more regarding the woman who's been inhabiting my considerations. The sincerity in that confession had stolen my respiration. So here I was, pursuing the suited man through a dimly illuminated passage that accessed into a territory that seemed more like a mystery than an establishment. Reduced illumination, private sections separated by silk dividers, the gentle murmur of dialogue in multiple languages. Prosperity whispered from every detail, the satin coverings, the manually decorated ceramics, the manner the personnel shifted with choreographed exactness. Miho positioned himself when I approached, and briefly I forgot how to respire. He'd exchanged the obsidian ensemble for midnight charcoal, the blazer flawlessly fitted to his structure. No neckwear again, just a crimson shirt unfastened at the throat, exposing those tattoos that crawled up his collarbone like obscure flames. His strands were arranged backward, emphasizing the severe angles of his features. He appeared like transgression dressed in silk. Jasmine, he drew my seat himself, a motion that seemed both courteous and claiming. You appear gorgeous. I'd agonized regarding what to dress, ultimately resolving on a simple emerald dress that seemed inadequate the duration I'd traveled through that entrance. But the manner Miho's irises tracked across me caused me to experience like I was dressed in jewels. This venue is, I faded, searching for phrases. I didn't understand venues like this existed. They exist for individuals who understand where to examine. He resolved across from me, movements liquid and restrained. Or individuals who claim them. You claim this? Among remaining elements. A server materialized with spirits. No selection, no inquiry, just a container that likely cost more than my monthly compensation. Miho acknowledged approval, and the server distributed before vanishing like smoke. I accepted a portion. It tasted like velvet and starlight. So, I stated, requiring to fracture the force of his attention, do you transport all the women you pursue to dinner here? His mouth shifted. Only the ones who accuse me of being their pursuer to my features. Despite everything, the terror, the confusion, the absolute insanity of this circumstance, I laughed. The resonance surprised us both. Inform me regarding yourself, Miho stated, reclining backward with his spirits. Beyond what I already understand, which is that you're an emergency nurse, that you accept your tea with one sweetener and cream, that you travel to your residence instead of accepting vehicles because you prefer the evening atmosphere, that you're cautious, capable, and far more alone than someone like you should be. The precision of his observations should have frightened me. Instead, it seemed like being witnessed for the initial occasion in years. You understand, I stated gradually, most individuals contemplate that pursuing. I favor comprehensive. Naturally you perform. Dinner arrived in sequences. Portions I couldn't identify but tasted like creation. Miho observed me consume with a force that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. And gradually, impossibly, I located myself relaxing. We conversed regarding soul, regarding medicine, regarding the peculiar isolation of residing in a metropolis of millions. Miho was captivating when he desired to be, requesting inquiries that caused me to forget I was dining with someone hazardous. His English was flawless, colored with an inflection that transformed certain phrases into silk. "Why nursing?" he inquired. "Restraint," I responded honestly. The spirits were causing me courageous. In an emergency section, everything possesses a regulation, a resolution. Hemorrhaging halts, bones restore, infections eliminate. It's structured, foreseeable. And your existence isn't. Not recently. I encountered his irises across the surface. Not since a certain man caused my pursuer to disappear and determined I required defense. Do you regret requesting me to move? I contemplated the inquiry. Contemplated 4 months of terror versus 4 days of a different variety of tension. Contemplated how my heart raced when I witnessed him versus how it raced when I was alone. "I don't understand yet," I confessed. "Fair sufficient." He elevated his tumbler in recognition. When dinner concluded, Miho proposed his arm. I accepted it, experiencing the solid warmth of him through his blazer. We entered into the sole evening, and briefly, everything seemed almost ordinary. Then the motor bellowed. It occurred rapidly. A motorbike shrieking around the angle, no illuminations aimed precisely at us. I froze, Korean headlights, my brain unable to process the warning. Miho shifted. One duration I was positioned beside him, the subsequent I was forced against the construction, his corpus a barrier between me and the avenue, his palm cradling the rear of my head like something valuable. The cycle overlooked us by centimeters. Miho's individuals materialized from nowhere, 3 of them granting chase on foot, another drawing upward in an obsidian vehicle. And Miho didn't even appear disturbed, just modifying his blazer with one palm while maintaining the opposite on my middle, steadying me. "Are you injured?" His tone was tranquil, too tranquil. "No, what just occurred?" Enter the vehicle. Not a solicitation. This occasion I didn't dispute. We journeyed in quiet, Miho's expression constricted, his digits drumming against his limb, the sole indication of tension. His mobile vibrated twice. He examined it, typed something, then examined me. They were examining me, he stated softly, witnessing how far they could thrust before I respond. "Examining you?" I almost got eliminated. "No," his tone transformed to iron. "You were never in hazard." I was there. The absolute conviction in that declaration should have been presumptuous. Instead, it seemed like truth. "And they unsuccessful," he continued, something obscure and satisfied coloring his manner. "Presently they understand precisely what occurs when someone warns what's mine." What's mine? Not under my defense. Mine. I pivoted to examine him, genuinely examine him. The keen profile, the restrained fury simmering beneath the exterior, the manner his palms had shifted to protect me without consideration. This wasn't just defense. This was something more primitive, more absolute, more hazardous. "Who are you?" I whispered. Miho encountered my irises in the obscurity of the vehicle, and for the initial occasion, I witnessed the truth in them. Not the refined businessman or the captivating dinner associate, but something older, firmer, forged in violence and survival. "I'm the cause soul's underground sleeps with one iris accessible," he stated softly. "I'm the man monarchs and criminals summon when they require difficulties to disappear. I'm the individual you should flee from, Jasmine Williams." He extended outward, his marked knuckles brushing my features with impossible tenderness. "But you won't flee, will you?" I should have. Heaven, I should have. Instead, I reclined into his contact, half horrified, half captivated, and whispered, "No." His irises obscured with something famished and triumphant. Excellent. Miho's penthouse was everything I'd envisioned and nothing I'd anticipated. Surface-to-ceiling transparencies overlooking Seoul, the metropolis glittering below like scattered jewels. Minimalist furnishings, obsidian hide, chrome glass exteriors that reflected illumination in keen angles. Creation on the barriers that likely cost more than my apartment complex. But it was the compact details that captured my attention. A bookshelf abundant with worn paperbacks, a succulent thriving on the sill, A photograph on the lateral surface, Miho, younger, laughing with an older man who possessed the identical keen bones. My father, Miho stated, capturing me examining. Before what? Before everything altered. He shifted to the counter, distributing 2 tumblers of something amber. Before I became Shadow. He'd invited me upward for tea following the incident with the motorbike. I'd stated affirmative because the alternative was proceeding to my residence to my vacant apartment and reliving the resonance of that motor, the sensation of being targeted. And D perhaps because I was fatigued of simulating I didn't desire to comprehend him. Miho extended me the tumbler, our digits brushed, transmitting electricity upward my arm. You can request, he stated. Request what? What you've been desiring to request since the establishment. What I am, what I perform. I'm not certain I'm prepared for those responses. But you will be. Not an inquiry, a conviction. He excused himself to accept a summon, abandoning me alone in the vast territory. I wandered, drawn to the transparencies, the vision, the sensation that I was positioned on top of a universe I barely comprehended. Then I witnessed the desk. Mahogany, costly, with a laptop secured on top and a solitary compartment marginally accessed. I shouldn't have examined, shouldn't have contacted anything, but something drew me forward. The compartment accessed silently. Inside, a manila document, substantial, worn at the edges like it had been accessed numerous occasions. My palms trembled as I extracted it outward. Photographs, dozens of them. Me departing the hospital, me at the bakery, me traveling to my residence at dusk, unaware of the lens tracking my movements. Different angles, different days, different garments. My apartment complex from across the avenue, my vehicle in the parking structure, my chamber transparency. The space rotated. The tumbler glided from my palm, fracturing against the surface in an explosion of crystal and whiskey. Jasmine. I rotated to locate Miho in the entrance, mobile still in palm, his expression transforming from concern to something firmer when he witnessed what I was securing. It was you, I whispered, my tone fracturing. All along, the observing, the pursuing. It was you. Jasmine, permit me to clarify. Clarify what? That you've been pursuing me for months, that every duration of defense was just. I thrust the document at him, photographs scattering across the costly surface like evidence of betrayal. You caused me to experience insane for being dreadful when you were the individual observing me the entire duration. I was defending you. From who? Yourself? Tears ignited my irises. You stated if you were my pursuer, I'd never have witnessed him breathing. Was that supposed to be a confession? Miho shifted toward me, palms elevated in emotion signified to tranquil. But I witnessed him differently presently, witnessed the predator beneath the silk. You shouldn't have located those, he stated, his tone deep and restrained. That's what you possess to express? Not I apologize or I can clarify. Just that I shouldn't have located your surveillance photographs of me. They're not what you assume. Then what are they, Miho? What possible clarification justifies this? Something sparked in his irises. Not remorse, resignation. They're evidence, he stated softly. Of every occasion my individuals halted someone from approaching too near. Every near oversight, every warning I neutralized before you even understood it existed. I stared at him, my respiration arriving in brief gasps. You witnessed surveillance, he continued, accepting another stride nearer. I witnessed proof of what I've maintained you secure from. I don't trust you. I'm not requesting you to. He extended downward, selecting one of the photographs. You departing the hospital at dusk. This was captured the evening a rival syndicate observer was tracking you. He's no longer a difficulty. Another photograph. This individual, a deceiver targeting international nurses. He's in a hospital presently, different variety. Another, this individual. Halt. I retreated toward the entrance, every instinct bellowing at me to flee. Just halt. I can't. I require to depart. Jasmine, don't. I elevated a palm, vision blurring with tears. Don't express my identity like that, like you didn't just. I couldn't conclude. Couldn't respire. I pivoted and fled. Miho summoned following me, but I didn't halt, didn't examine backward. Just fled for the ascent, struck the switch with trembling digits, and prayed the entrances would secure before he could pursue. They performed. I succeeded to the avenue, signaled a vehicle, granted my location through tears. The operator simulated not to witness. My apartment was obscure and frigid when I arrived. I secured every security, examined every transparency, and collapsed on my furniture with my mobile in my palm. I should summon the authorities, exhibit them the photographs, ultimately possess proof that I wasn't insane, that someone genuinely had been observing. But Miho's phrases reverberated in my mind. They're evidence of what I've maintained you secure from. My mobile vibrated. Unknown sequence, not Miho's. I almost didn't respond, but something caused me to force accept. Greeting. Quiet, then respiring, then a tone distorted, mechanical. Incorrect. He can't locate you this occasion, Jasmine. The connection terminated. I sat frozen, mobile forced to my ear as the comprehension crashed across me like frost water. The photographs, the surveillance, Miho's individuals tracking my movements. He wasn't deceiving. He genuinely had been defending me from something worse. And presently, for the initial occasion in weeks, I was genuinely alone. My mobile vibrated again, a message from Miho's sequence. Where are you? Then another. Jasmine, respond to me. And ultimately, remain inside. Secure your entrances. I'm arriving. I examined at the obscurity forcing against my transparencies, at the photographs still ignited into my recollection, at the horrifying territory between defense and claim, and I comprehended I'd created a horrible error. I'd fled from the sole individual maintaining me breathing. The energy descended at 11:49. One duration I was staring at Miho's messages, attempting to determine whether to reply. The subsequent, my apartment descended into obscurity so absolute I couldn't witness my individual palms. Just a circuit, I whispered to myself. Just the complex's horrible electrical. The entrance fractured inward. No caution, no request. Just the violent crack of timber granting method. And then palms, harsh, gloved, were grasping me. I bellowed, but something forced across my mouth, chemical sweet, igniting my throat. The universe angled, obscured further. When I awakened, everything injured. My mind throbbed, my wrists ignited where restraints severed into skin. I was on a concrete surface, frigid seeping through my garments, the aroma of corrosion and aged petroleum substantial in the atmosphere. A storage facility, abandoned judging by the fractured transparencies elevated above and the graffiti-marked barriers. She's awakened. The tone arrived from the phantoms, Korean accented differently than Miho's, firmer, colder. A man entered into the weak moonlight filtering through the transparencies. Mid-30s, lean with a mark traveling from his temple to his chin. His ensemble was costly but worn, like he'd stolen it from someone who mattered. Jasmine Williams, he stated, crouching before me. Shadow's little nurse. Do you recognize how extensive I've been observing you? My throat sealed. You're Dante, he grinned, and it was nothing like Miho's hazardous shift. This was decay disguised as captivation. The man whose existence your valuable defender attempted to eliminate. The man who's been pursuing you since the evening you sealed one of his animals. The emergency room, the man with ink and a penetration injury. You were there, I whispered. I'm always there. Dante extended outward, his digits grazing my features in a parody of Miho's tenderness. Observing, anticipating, learning all your attractive little schedules. The blossoms, the notation on my vehicle. Responsible. He positioned himself, circling me like a predator. You witness, Shadow assumed he could defend you by maintaining you near, but he created a critical error. What error? Dante's grin broadened. He permitted you to witness him, permitted you to signify. And presently when I position a bullet in your mind, he'll ultimately comprehend what it seems like to eliminate something valuable. Terror flooded through me, frigid and absolute. You were never the reward, Jasmine, you're the caution. He extracted a mobile, typing something with informal efficiency. I've just transmitted your position to Shadow. He'll arrive for you, naturally. They always perform when you accept their possessions. I'm not his. Oh, but you are. Dante crouched again, his respiration heated against my features. You just don't comprehend what that signifies yet. He's not a man, Jasmine. He's a monarch. And monarchs don't negotiate. They conquer. He positioned himself, motioning to someone in the phantoms. Another man materialized, larger, silent, securing a weapon with professional comfort. Observe her. When shadow arrives, you recognize what to perform. Dante traveled aside, his footfalls reverberating in the vast territory. I was abandoned alone with the guard, my heart hammering so firm I assumed it might crack my ribs. Assume. My palms were restrained. The guard was armed. The storage facility possessed multiple departures, but I was in the center, exposed. Then I experienced it, the burden around my wrist. The bracelet. Miho had granted it to me at dinner, a delicate platinum element I'd assumed was just jewelry. Contemplated a present, he'd stated, for defense. I'd assumed he signified symbolically. Presently, experiencing the marginal warmth against my skin, I comprehended. Positioning device. He'd positioned a tracker on me. Summon me, not them. I couldn't summon, but perhaps the bracelet was sufficient. Perhaps his individuals were already organizing. Perhaps. The guard's mobile vibrated. He responded, listened, then examined me with something like sympathy. They're arriving, he stated in fractured English. You should request they arrive rapidly. They arrived like phantoms granted structure. One duration the storage facility was silent except for my respiring and the guard's footfalls. The subsequent, the illuminations, what limited functioned exploded in showers of sparks, weapon discharge, bellowing. The guard beside me rotated, elevating his weapon, but never acquired the opportunity to discharge. A figure shifted through the obscurity, liquid, lethal, impossibly rapid. The guard descended without a resonance. Then quiet, dense, anticipating. Jasmine. Miho's tone severed through the obscurity like a weapon. Not elevated, not disturbed, just my identity, communicated with a force that caused my respiration to capture. He entered into the moonlight, and I forgot how to respire. Circulation spattered his shirt. His knuckles were exposed. His irises, those obscure, bottomless irises, ignited with something primitive and horrifying. He appeared like retribution dressed in a three-portion ensemble. Miho. He was on his limbs beside me in seconds, his palms, still heated, still marked, cupping my features with a tenderness that contradicted the violence radiating from him. Did they injure you? His tone fractured on the inquiry. Jasmine, did they? No, I'm acceptable. He drew me against his torso, his arms crushing me near like he was attempting to physically secure me together. I experienced him trembling, actually trembling. You shouldn't have fled, he whispered into my strands. You shouldn't have departed. I apologize. Weapon discharge erupted from the far conclusion of the storage facility. Miho shifted, positioning his corpus between me and the warning, his palm locating a weapon I hadn't witnessed him transporting. He discharged twice, 2 corpses descended. I stared at him, at the man who'd purchased me dinner and cited poetry, presently executing warnings with surgical exactness. Don't examine, he stated, his liberated palm covering my irises. Don't observe this portion. But I already had, and heaven assist me, I wasn't frightened. I was captivated. More of his individuals materialized, silent, efficient, dressed in the identical obscure ensembles and vacant expressions. They shifted through the storage facility like they'd rehearsed this, eliminating spaces and securing departures with tactical exactness. Dante's tone reverberated from somewhere above. You assume this is concluded, Shadow? She's already expired. Miho's expression constricted. He examined upward at the platforms, his expression transforming to something arctic and absolute. Remain here, he informed me. My individuals will defend you. Don't. But he had already disappeared, shifting upward a corroded staircase with the identical lethal elegance. I observed him vanish into the phantoms, my heart in my throat. Seconds transferred, then minutes, then a bellow severed brief, pursued by the dense resonance of something striking concrete. Quiet. Miho materialized again on the platform alone, cleansing circulation from his knuckles with a cloth. He descended gradually, each stride measured, until he positioned before me again. "It's concluded," he stated softly. "You're secure." I should have requested what occurred, should have required details. Instead, I requested the sole inquiry that mattered. "How extensive have you been observing me?" Miho knelt again, his palms locating mine, cautiously severing through the restraints with a weapon that materialized from nowhere. "Since the evening you rescued one of mine in the emergency room," he confessed, rubbing sensation backward into my wrists with infinite tenderness. He was hemorrhaging. "You didn't even recoil at the circulation, didn't request inquiries, just sealed him and informed him to remain from difficulty." He examined upward at me, and in the fractured moonlight, his irises contained something exposed. "You managed a criminal like he was worth rescuing." "Nobody's ever examined at me like that, Jasmine. Like I might be worth rescuing too." My respiration captured. "So you've been defending me since that evening?" "Affirmative." His digit traced circles on my wrist across the bracelet that had rescued my existence. "I couldn't permit you to proceed, couldn't permit anyone else to witness what I witnessed." "That's not defense, Miho. That's fixation." "I recognize," he concluded. "I've never simulated to be anything else." He positioned himself, drawing me to my feet, his palms steadying me when my limbs warned to grant. Around us, his individuals shifted with silent efficiency, eliminating evidence, eliminating the evening like it had never occurred. "Arrive," Miho stated, his arm resolving around my middle. "Let's proceed to our residence." I should have requested where residence was, should have insisted on proceeding to my apartment, my existence, my universe. Instead, I reclined into his warmth and permitted him to guide me into the dawn. Behind us, soul ignited with the consequences of warning what belonged to Shadow. Miho's mansion wasn't a residence. It was a fortress, elevated barriers, protection lenses, individuals stationed at every entrance. I'd existed here 4 days, recovering from the abduction, attempting to process the reality of my new existence. The woman who'd been kidnapped wasn't the identical one who'd awakened in silk coverings, surrounded by prosperity and hazard in equal proportion. That woman had been innocent, frightened, alone. This woman comprehended that security arrived with an expense, and his identity was Shadow. "You're awakened." I pivoted from the transparency to locate Miho in the entrance, securing 2 mugs of tea. He'd exchanged his circulation-spattered ensemble for obsidian trousers and an ivory shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, exposing the complete extent of his tattoos. Dragons and phoenixes crawled upward his forearms, Korean script enclosed around his wrists, creation and violence inked into his skin like a history document inscribed in suffering. "Couldn't sleep," I confessed. "Too silent." "You're secure here." "I recognize." And I performed. That was the horrifying portion. "Inform me regarding Shadow." Miho positioned down the tea, his expression transforming to something protected. "What do you desire to recognize?" "Everything, who you genuinely are, how you became this." He was silent for an extensive duration, staring outward at the Seoul skyline. When he ultimately communicated, his tone contained the burden of years. "My father was Kang Juseok, a businessman, legitimate, respected. When I was 20, a rival syndicate determined his transportation corporation was beneficial. They created a proposal. He declined." Miho's expression constricted. "They eliminated him before me, caused me to observe. Then they granted me a selection, accept his position in their organization or join him in the ground." "Oh, Miho." I accepted the third alternative. His tone transformed to iron. "I eliminated them all, every solitary individual involved in his murder. Then I accepted their territory, their connections, their authority." He pivoted to confront me, and I witnessed the youth he'd existed in and the man he'd become. Shadow wasn't an identity I selected. It was a designation I acquired through circulation. The underground required a monarch following. I ignited the aged regime to ash. So I became one. I shifted toward him, my palms locating his. "You can't defend me by eliminating everything that warns me." "Can't I?" His digits constricted around mine. I've constructed an empire on that principle, Jasmine. Everything I am, everything I've performed, it's all existed to guarantee nobody ever causes me defenseless again. But you can't eliminate the complete universe. I'd attempt. He drew me nearer, his forehead resting against mine. For you, I'd attempt. That's not affection, mijo. That's fixation, claim. I recognize. His respiration phantomed across my lips. I informed you I was hazardous, that you should flee, but you didn't. You remained even following witnessing what I am, what I'm capable of. You remained because you rescued me. No. His palm cupped my features with devastating tenderness. You remained because you comprehend that in my universe, affection and violence are inseparable. That I eliminate so you can sleep, that I observe so you can respire, that I claim you so nobody else ever can. The truth of it stole my respiration, because he was correct. I performed comprehend, and heaven assist me, I didn't desire to depart. Then what does that render me? I whispered. Miho's mouth shifted into something almost tender. Mine. He contacted me then, gradual, measured, tasting of tea and obscure vows. His palms tangled in my strands, securing me like something valuable and profane. When we ultimately fractured aside, soul glittered behind him like scattered jewels. I possess a gathering tonight, he stated, his tone harsh. Syndicate matters. You should remain here. No. He blinked. Jasmine. You stated I'm yours. That signifies I position beside you, not behind you. Not concealed aside where it's secure. I encountered his irises with a conviction I hadn't understood I possessed. If I'm proceeding to be portion of your universe, then permit me to be portion of it, all of it. Something fierce and proud blazed in his expression. You comprehend what you're requesting? Affirmative. There's no returning following this. You'll be marked as mine, defended, affirmative, but also targeted. Everyone who desires to injure me will witness you as the fastest route. I recognize. Miho studied me for an extensive duration, then acknowledged gradually. Then tonight, you'll position beside me, silent, perceptive, the woman even monarchs terror to examine at too extensively. That evening I dressed in obsidian, a present from Miho, silk and simple elegance. He secured a necklace around my throat, jewels that captured the illumination like imprisoned stars. Remember, he breathed against my ear. You don't communicate, you don't respond, you merely exist beside me. That alone will transmit a communication. What communication? His lips shifted against my skin. That shadow has selected, and regret to anyone who warns what's his. The gathering was conducted in a private space in the identical establishment where we'd possessed dinner. Men in costly ensembles occupied the territory, Korean, Chinese, Japanese, all radiating the identical restrained violence. They positioned themselves when Miho entered, every solitary one. And when I traveled in beside him, their irises broadened in recognition and something like terror. Miho drew my seat himself. I positioned myself, palms folded in my embrace, expression neutral, while the most hazardous men in soul observed and comprehended. The nurse who'd been hunted had disappeared. In her position sat the woman the monarch defended, and that silent declaration caused me untouchable. 6 months later, we returned to Crimson Moon. The identical violet sculptures, the identical dim azure illuminations, the identical pulse of rhythm through costly surfaces. But everything had altered. I dressed in burgundy tonight, a dress that whispered rather than bellowed, custom created to accommodate like a second skin. Jewels glittered at my throat and wrists, presents from a man who expressed affection through gorgeous, hazardous elements. Miho traveled beside me, his palm at the curve of my spine, claiming, defending, proud. His universe had become mine. His adversaries understood my features. His empire incorporated my identity. I was no longer the frightened nurse seeking security in a movement. I was the woman who'd learned to move with obscurity itself. Nostalgic? Miho breathed as we entered the lounge. Should I be? This is where you requested a stranger to rescue you. His lips brushed my ear. Where everything commenced. No. I pivoted to confront him, my palm locating his features. It commenced the evening I rescued one of yours. The remainder was just catching upward. his irises obscured with that familiar famish. Move with me? I assumed you'd never request. We shifted to the surface, and the gathering divided. They always performed presently, whether because of Miho's reputation or mine. I no longer understood, no longer regarded. The composition was gradual, personal, the identical one that had executed that initial evening. Miho drew me near, and we shifted like we'd been performing this for years. In a manner, we had. This movement had been inevitable from the duration our irises encountered. Someone's observing, Miho stated softly, his attention directing to a man at the counter. Too interested, too focused. I grinned, the expression securing none of the terror it once would have. Then perhaps we should move, but this occasion I guided. My palm directed his, my strides dictated his, my corpus restrained the territory between us. Miho pursued, amusement and pride sparking in his expression. You've altered, he observed. You altered me. Regrets? I contemplated the inquiry. Contemplated the woman I'd existed, alone, frightened, hunted. Contemplated the woman I'd become, defended, powerful, partnered with a monarch who'd ignite the universe for me. None, I whispered. Not a solitary one. The composition transformed, swelling toward its crescendo. I drew Miho nearer, our corpuses shifting as one beneath the fractured illumination of the sculptures. You stated a pursuer was observing. I breathed against his throat. You were correct, he answered, his tone harsh with emotion. Was it you? His arms constricted around me, his lips locating my temple with devastating tenderness. Always. I angled my head backward, encountering those obscure irises that had initially vowed defense and shipped so substantially more. Then don't cease observing. Never. We moved as the lounge pulsed around us, two phantoms shifting like one, affection and hazard fused so completely they couldn't be separated. When the composition concluded, Miho didn't liberate me, just secured me there in the center of the surface, while souls underground observed and comprehended. This was no ordinary affection. This was fixation refined into devotion, claim transformed into partnership, violence rendered tender through the simple act of selecting each remaining. Again and again, despite everything. The sculpture illumination reflected in Miho's irises, transforming them liquefied platinum. In that duration, I witnessed everything we were and everything we'd become. Terror transformed to authority, obscurity into devotion, a pursuer into a rescuer, or perhaps the reverse. I no longer understood. It didn't signify. Because somewhere between the initial movement and this one, I'd learned the truth that Miho had understood all along. Sometimes the soul security is in the arms of the most hazardous man in the space. Sometimes defense appears like claim. Sometimes affection dresses the features of fixation. And sometimes when a stranger requests, "Would you move with me?" a pursuer's observing, the sole correct response is affirmative. Even, especially, when that stranger becomes the pursuer himself. We departed Crimson Moon as dawn crawled across Seoul, the metropolis awakening to a new day that we'd already resided through. Miho's vehicle anticipated at the boundary, his individuals forming a defensive barrier that divided solely for us. Residence? He inquired. I examined at the man who'd rescued me, pursued me, claimed me, and transformed me into something I'd never envisioned becoming. The man whose obscurity I'd learned to move with, the man I'd selected to cherish despite, or perhaps because of everything he was. Affirmative, I stated, my palm locating his. Residence. Because residence wasn't a location anymore. It was the territory between defense and claim, the distance between terror and desire, the duration when you position your palm in a stranger's and comprehend they've been observing you all along, and you wouldn't possess it any remaining manner. We operated into the soul morning, two silhouettes against the ascending sun, affection and violence braided so securely they'd become the identical element. And behind us, in the vacant lounge, the sculptures captured the dawn illumination and scattered it across the surface where we'd initially moved, the surface where everything had commenced, the surface where 6 months later everything had arrived complete circle. The narrative of the nurse and the monarch, the woman and shadow, the movement that never genuinely concluded. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, beautiful people. See you in the next one.